Coming up on Jerusalem Dateline, fighting in Gaza continues as leaders battle to free the hostages. A recent survey revealing Palestinian support for the Hamas attack. Plus, accusations of war crimes hurling toward Israel from the UN. And one woman calling out anti-Semitism in U.S. cities and college campuses. And trauma survivors learning to keep their sanity in an insane world. All this and more coming up on this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. As international rumors of a deal to release some Israeli hostages are circulating, Israel is keeping quiet about the possibility. And as CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl reports, the Hamas war in Gaza continues, and Hezbollah ramps up its attacks on Israel along the northern border.
Families of Israeli hostages gathered outside Israel's military headquarters in Tel Aviv ahead of their meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu and his war cabinet last night. Netanyahu told the families that the return of the hostages is a sacred mission and that he and his friends are responsible for their return. But for the families, it didn't go far enough.
What we've heard is that taking down Hamas and bringing the hostages are as important, are equally important. As far as I am concerned, and I represent myself and my family, this is incredibly disappointing.
Udi Goren, whose cousin Tal Chaimi is being held captive in Gaza, says he believes the return of the hostages should be the top priority right now. Nevertheless, he says, it makes sense that details of any deal are a secret.
It makes, it just takes common sense to understand that if they told us about the details of the deal that is now being done, then it might jeopardize it.
Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh says a deal is close. Agence France Presse reporting 50 to 100 Israeli and foreign civilian hostages would be released in exchange for around 300 Palestinians in Israeli jails. The deal would include humanitarian aid into Gaza and a 5-day truce. The U.S. also continues to hint at a soon-coming deal for the release of at least part of the hostages.
But as you heard the Deputy National Security Advisor say yesterday, we believe we're closer than we've ever been. So we're hopeful. But there's still work to be done, and nothing is done until it's all done.
Inside Gaza, fighting continues. Over the last day, the Israel Defense Forces says they struck some 250 terror targets, including dozens of terrorists, rocket launchers, and terrorist infrastructure. According to the IDF, one rocket launching post was located in a civilian residential area. Terrorists launched a heavy barrage of rockets from that Gaza location toward Tel Aviv yesterday. Troops also found a weapons stockpile in the residence of a senior terrorist, including in a baby's room. The fighting is not limited to Gaza and southern Israel. Along the northern border, heavy exchanges of fire as Hezbollah launches rockets at communities, with Hezbollah causing heavy damage to an Israeli army base. Hezbollah, which is backed by Iran, has launched regular and escalating attacks since October 7th, but so far no signs it plans a full-scale assault. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
The Israel Defense Forces military doctrine mandates the highest standards of conduct for its soldiers of any military in the world. Yet international accusations brand its fight against Hamas in Gaza genocide. 5 nations have called on the International Criminal Court to investigate Israel for possible war crimes. Dale Hurd has the story.
The International Criminal Court's chief prosecutor Karim Khan has warned that he's considering war crimes charges over Israel's conduct of the war and its blockade of supplies into Gaza.
I have to say that Israel has clear obligations in relation to its war with Hamas. Not just moral obligations, but legal obligations to comply with the laws of armed conflict.
The United Nations is also collecting evidence, saying Israel may be committing the crime of collective punishment with its siege.
We want the International Criminal Court to hold Netanyahu accountable for the war crimes and the crimes against humanity that Israel is committing.
First of all, nations are not charged with war crimes, individuals are. And those charges don't come after weeks, but in most cases after many years of investigation. The International Criminal Court would also have to prove Israeli officials willfully tried to kill civilians or cause suffering. Jeffrey Korn, former U.S. Army senior advisor on law of war issues, currently leads the Center for Military Law and Policy at Texas Tech University. He says war crimes are not committed simply because civilians die, but how and why they die.
We don't define a war crime in an attack by what occurs. We define a war crime in an attack by the decision to launch the attack. So it's a conduct-based equation, not a result-based equation. And so when we look at the images of destruction and civilian suffering in war, and we jump to the conclusion that that must be a war crime, that's like saying 1 + I don't know equals war crime.
The Israeli Defense Forces Code of Ethics sets a very high bar, stating, "Every human being is of value, regardless of his or her origin, religion, nationality, gender, status, or position. The IDF servicemen and women will act in a judicious and safe manner in all they do, out of recognition of the supreme value of human life." Andrew Tucker is an expert in international law in The Hague, Netherlands.
That doesn't mean Israel doesn't make mistakes. It doesn't mean Israel doesn't do wrong things. It simply means that in terms of process, in terms of decision making, it's, I think, indisputable that Israel holds itself to the highest moral and legal standards.
Some of those who want Israelis charged for war crimes are very upset with Karim Khan for not having already issued arrest warrants, with the anti-Israel BDS movement branding Khan a genocide enabler. But some believe it's all but assured Israelis will be charged, with so many international agencies, including the United Nations, aligned against Israel.
Most Israeli military leaders know that no matter how hard they try to actually and comply with the law and do their best to deal with this difficult situation, they're going to be condemned.
Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Up next, an underground labyrinth in Gaza covering 300 miles beneath schools, mosques, and hospitals when we come back. As the IDF continues to advance against Hamas infrastructure, a major target remains the miles of tunnels beneath the Gaza Strip. The elaborate system is astounding. Weeks into Israel's ground campaign inside Gaza, the IDF has uncovered more than 100 tunnels.
The tunnel is let down more than 20 meters down, and it is built with electricity.
The tunnels that they discovered would be like the pit at the Kiryat Israeli military headquarters, which is a vast underground tunnel network in Tel Aviv under military headquarters, and that's basically what Hamas has accomplished.
Yonah Bob is the senior military analyst for the Jerusalem Post and author of Target Tehran. Despite Gazans living in poverty, Hamas made funding the underground system a major priority to play a key part in its war machine and a place to hide.
Even though they're not a developed country, even though they say that they don't have enough food and all kinds of other things economically for their people, they managed to develop a massive complex. One of the tunnels has an elevator that goes down 30 meters deep. Typically, Hamas tunnels are known to go 3 meters, 5 meters deep. So this was a very special tunnel. Also, all kinds of other facilities, air conditioning, oxygen, food, water, a vast complex, even beyond what Israel expected. And the initial Israeli intelligence conclusions are that Yahya Sinwar, who's the chief of Hamas in Gaza, Mohammed Deif, the military chief of Hamas in Gaza, there's a good chance that they and other top officials were there.
Yonah Bob says the IDF approach to the tunnels is two-pronged: discover and destroy.
Discovering, very far along. The IDF had a good feel for what was there beforehand. Again, they found more than what they expected. A top Israeli official said, this time we are not just going to neutralize them, but actually destroy the network. Let's say they have control of most of the area. They only start to really destroy the tunnels after they get that control. So that process is just starting.
Yonah Bob describes the daunting task of trying to eliminate Hamas, given that network and the terror group's methods, all while the world is watching.
It's unbelievably complicated. The Shifa hospital has been said by the IDF going back all the way to 2014 as a major place where top Hamas officials would hide during the war, usually underground. And the idea was they knew that Israel couldn't attack from the air, and that even coming in with ground forces, even special forces, was very complicated because there's patients everywhere.
Lieutenant Colonel Amnon Scheffler explains how Hamas uses the tunnel network.
These tunnels reach different shafts and piers that are outside of the hospital, carry out terrorist activity, either launching rockets or attacking soldiers, and then coming back through these tunnels to hide underneath the hospital.
Scheffler described video of the Al-Shifa Hospital's main entrance on October 7th, apparently showing a hostage being dragged into the hospital.
Also, we're seeing here another civilian that was brought in by Hamas, bringing in their AK-47s and carrying in a civilian to hold him as a hostage here in the hospital.
Yonabah believes while both sides see value in the media, the result is often nowhere close to being fairly told. Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari spoke from the Rantisi Hospital.
Hamas used this hospital. We're now entering into the area of the hospital where we had found the evidence.
Reporters came in with Israel's Navy SEALs. They went in real time so that nobody could say that Israel had, sort of staged the scene. And they saw the room where they had been holding hostages, all right next to huge amounts of weaponry. The global media coverage has still been incredibly critical of Israel, not fully taking in the extent to which Hamas is not a little bit, but systematically exploiting these hospitals for its operations.
One key voice is speaking out against the resurgence of anti-Semitism spreading from college campuses to major cities to social media. CBN's Charlene Aaron recently talked to Noah Tishby about her mission to spread truth and warn the West about the threat of anti-Israeli sentiment.
This well-known Israeli American once served as her country's first envoy for combating anti-Semitism. While Noah Tishby no longer holds that official role, her advocacy for her homeland continues, especially after October 7th.
This time around, they not only did it in the worst of ways, beheading of babies in their cribs, the burning of entire families alive, the taking a pregnant woman and slushing her belly and pulling out the fetus and beheading the fetus.
Tishby is no stranger in the fight against anti-Jewish hatred, and that hatred has only risen since the Israel-Hamas war began. Following the October 7th Hamas attack, a significant spike in anti-Semitic incidents have been reported across the U.S. Cases of harassment, vandalism, and assault have jumped by almost 400%. Tishby recently told the Friends of the Israel Defense Forces that underlying messaging paved the way for the Hamas attack and the atmosphere that followed.
The grooming, ongoing grooming of Western civilization through universities, the media, and social media, so that when the time came and the Islamic Nazis carried out the act of genocide, many in the West would celebrate it, justify it, and no longer tell the difference between good and evil.
Pro-Palestinian protests have broken out worldwide on college campuses and in major cities. Protesters have gone as far as ripping down posters of Jewish hostages still held captive by Hamas.
It's just horrifying to me how American youth have been brainwashed so badly to think that tearing down a photo of a kidnapped child is God's work. It defies logic on so many levels. It's fine if you don't agree with Israeli policies. That's totally okay. You don't like the government. That's totally fine. What is your excuse when there's been an intent to kidnap a child or to rape a child or to murder or behead a baby?
In September, Tishby reached through renowned entertainment Variety magazine to write about the dangers of anti-Semitism masquerading as anti-Zionism, the movement for the self-determination and statehood of the Jewish people in their ancestral homeland.
This obsessive hatred towards Israel is nothing but anti-Semitism in disguise. So when the Variety thing came out, I wrote an epilogue afterwards to just be like, I wrote this before this happened, and here it is upon us.
Tishby condemns the phrase "from the river to the sea," a rallying cry at many pro-Palestinian demonstrations.
The river is the Jordan River, the sea is the Mediterranean Sea, and from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, means ethnically cleansing the Jews from their ancestral land. There is no other meaning to it.
She also pushes back against those trying to equate October 7th with Israel's military campaign in Gaza, while also condemning the Hamas act of hiding behind innocent Palestinians.
Hamas have effectively turned Gaza into a terrorist base, and the entire city. Their intent is to use Palestinian people as human shields and get as many casualties as they possibly can while their leaders are hiding underground. The blood is on Hamas's hands.
Meanwhile, Tishby warns this entire moment should be seen as a wake-up call to other countries. Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
Coming up, a flash from the past. Holocaust trauma survivors facing an increasing hostile world again. Although Jews make up less than 3% of the American population, the FBI states they are the targets of 60% of all hate crimes. On top of that, anti-Semitic incidents have seen an alarming spike since October 7th, leaving many Jewish Americans with psychological scars. CBN medical reporter Lori Johnson brings us the story.
As German Jews, Eva Perlman's family narrowly escaped Nazi soldiers during World War II.
We are not that many survivors left. I'm the last generation of actual eyewitnesses.
Perlman never thought she'd see the rise in anti-Semitism Jews endure today in the U.S.
It is really frightening.
Many of her people are once again afraid to acknowledge they're Jewish.
We cannot have a Star of David in our necklace, or it's dangerous. If a man wears a kippah on the street, a skull cap, he may be attacked.
She worries synagogues may be targeted.
I feel that anything can happen at any time.
Even gathering with other Jews in hidden buildings feels scary.
I was in a place that had no name. No name. It didn't say what it was. It's like a basement place, which was kind of safe, but the door could open onto the sidewalk outside, and I was afraid that somebody might just open the door and start shooting.
Mental health experts say this current rise in anti-Semitism can cause many Holocaust survivors to almost relive that past trauma. Even many younger Jews are making the connection between now and then.
Feeling that level of fear, especially on college campuses where there's more violence happening on a daily basis, can be incredibly terrifying. And so it can 100% be something that is sparked again within us when we start to hear stories of how it started in World War II.
Therapists see many Jews experiencing generational trauma that stems from centuries of persecution.
We know from the Psalms that the Babylonians, when they exiled Jews from Israel, we know that they threw Jewish babies off the cliffs.
Rabbi and author Steve Later says today's anti-Semitism opens old wounds.
This is a new chapter in the oldest of stories. And this kind of event triggers it in all of us. My father used to bury gold coins in the backyard in case we had to make a run for it.
Similar to the days before World War II, today's Jews are feeling a sense of betrayal.
We are in a world where people who act as friends when they need us are not really friends when we need them. That's a very harsh reality for the generation of my children, millennials and Gen Z, to learn.
People that we thought we knew, people we thought we had a lot in common with, are now saying things that are incredibly anti-Semitic.
Mental health experts recommend people experiencing trauma practice self-care.
Feeling safe and grounded through spiritual activities, nature, exercise, prayer, good friends.
We are not in a friendless world. Some amazing non-Jews have stepped up, spoken out, and are standing with us shoulder to shoulder. I have learned that no one suffers pain better alone. The worst part of pain, the most painful part of pain, is the feeling of isolation and abandonment. So to you, Lori, to everyone listening, thank you. Thank you for asking, how are you really? It's that really word that means so much to Jews. And thank you for giving us a platform and a voice, and thank you for being on the right side of good and evil.
Lori Johnson, CBN News.
Still ahead, helping a vulnerable population traumatized by the war with Hamas. For many in Israel, life will never be the same, especially for those who witnessed Hamas's massacre or were forced to flee the attack. CBN Israel is providing counseling and a safe place to stay to help them recover.
I'm on an antidepressant. I am a vegetable right now, a vegetable. I have no emotions. If the bombing starts now, I know another medication I need to take.
Marina and her son escaped from their apartment in Ashkelon, 14 miles from the Gaza border. They were familiar with sirens and the threat of rockets, but the infiltration of terrorists on the streets around their home and hearing shots being fired ramped up fear to uncontrollable levels.
It's an indescribable stress which, well, I don't know what to compare it with. I think a person in ordinary life can never experience such mixed negative fear and these feelings.
Marina had never imagined being in such distress.
For 45 years, I've never in my life been in such a state. That is to have shaky hands, to, vomiting. And I'm shaking, and it's just, you don't know what's happening to you. This animalistic fear that it will engulf you, you're shaking, and you don't understand at all what to do, where to run.
Marina felt she had no one to turn to.
I'm alone in the world. I'm broken. I'm from Ukraine, I'm from Kharkov. I have a mom and a brother there. They bomb there periodically too. I'm broken. I understand that I'm not feeling well. I need to change something in this life. And I say, God, please help me.
CBN Israel brought Marina and her son to the safety of a hotel in Eilat and provided counseling care for her. We're also supporting a community of other evacuees in the same hotel.
God works through people, and those people were sent to me at show. I really needed help. I was already drowning emotionally. The one right in front of you today is not the same person. So I want to say to everyone who helps us, and vulnerable people like us, and you took those people by their hands and just brought them to safety. Thank you so much for your kindness to me and my son. Thank you for your support and your help.
Well, that's all for this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Thanks for joining us. And remember to pray for the peace of Jerusalem, the release of all the hostages, the safety of Israeli soldiers, and all innocent civilians caught in harm's way. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.